Hi there. Welcome to Docker for Create React App Development with Hot Reloading. This is Demystifying Dev with Victor Kane. That's what we want to do, leveling the learning curve together for full stack development here on my YouTube channel. So today, what we want to do is just whip up a Docker environment for developing with Create React App, without having to install dependencies or anything. I got my image all set up. I can run up my container or several different containers and compare what's going on or do something or get on with my work. It's much simpler than installing everything every time. So we have some references for you here. Create React App, getting started, is from the React docs themselves, and it's pretty straightforward. Should go over that. How to install Docker on Mac OS, and how to Docker with Create React App. Now, if you're using Create React App and you want to know how to Docker that, that's what we're doing today. This is fine. This is good reference. But in case you need to Dockerize some other app, maybe for deployment and not for development, this article could help you also. Everything's going to be in the README on the repo. Just scroll down a bit under the video and you'll see where the repo is in GitHub, and you're set to go. So we've added hot reloading because, again, we're not interested in deployment today. We're interested in how can I get a really cool and easy development environment set up. So we've added the hot reloading via the suggestions made by Michael Herman in Dockerizing a React app. So that's something you could take a look at. Okay. What's the plan? We want to set up a Create React App dev environment running locally, right, in Docker. And we want to hot reload our way through any local dev tasks we have at hand. Again, we're using Docker for development here, and that's an often overlooked aspect of how convenient Docker is to use. So the first thing, of course, you must have Docker running on your machine. So we have to Docker up, right? So we want to make sure that we have Docker installed, and we just follow one of the articles on how to install Docker. Now you can use Docker Machine, or you can use Docker Desktop. I myself prefer Docker Machine that I install with Homebrew. You can install it on Linux, of course. Because, I don't want to use Docker all the time. I don't want to have it running all the time. I don't want to have this huge app running on my laptop. So if you are on a Mac and you prefer Docker Desktop, okay, all of what we're going to be doing today will be fine. Also, no matter what system you're on, as long as you have Docker running, we're good to go. So in my case, I have Docker Machine running, but not as a service, it's just there. So I really need to see if Docker Machine is running. And in order to do that, just go straight to my terminal. And I'm going to do Docker Machine IP. Oh, I see. Okay, so I recently rebooted my machine and it's not running. So let's start it. So that takes a little bit to get the machine up. And it is saying that I may need to run this command here because Docker Machine's running, but the question is, are the environment variables all set up? So I get that out of the way. And okay, got all this stuff, and it says run this command to configure your shell. Eval Okay, so we'll run this command. This is to make sure that the shell knows when you execute various different Docker commands, it can connect with the machine. So we're all set to go. So now, Docker machine IP, it's there. Now, so as not to have to go through this every time, I have set this up in my shell. So every time I bring up a terminal, the environment variables are done. All I need to do is to start the machine, Docker machine start, and then I can just bring up a new terminal and I'll be okay. What I do is I put this command here. We check if Docker machine, this is in my Z shell RC file, right? If Docker machine, right, then local machine, blah, 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 and just run the same command we just did by hand. So every time I bring up a new terminal, I'm okay, right? I don't have to start doing it all over again. Cool. So we're all dockered up. Now what? We're going to whip up a create React app. We're going to docker up with the app, test the hot reloading, and then use the image for whatever we want. Cool. So now let's whip up the create React app. We create a repo and run create React app. We're going to do it in a little unconventional manner because we're going to make a directory. Usually when you run create React app, it creates a subdirectory and goes in there and everything. So it's just to be different. So let's create our directory. Okay, let's go in there. Great. So let's just go ahead and make a repo here. And now, unconventionally, we're going to create a create React app instance. We can use npx for this. The reason we're using npx is that way we know we're going to get the most recent version. I never install create React app globally. I'm always going to run it with npx, and then I know I've got the latest one. So this takes a little time. Okay, here we go. We're all done. So we got all our instructions going on, and let's have a look and see what we have. So we've got our gitignore file. We've got a readme file. This is the regular readme file. So what we can do is we can just move readme to readme, and later on we'll have the readme, which is the tutorial that'll be with this repository when we commit it. So since we actually have a create React app all set up here, we're going to go ahead and do our initial commit. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this, and just to make sure it's there before we dockerize it. So let's just go ahead and start the app. Okay, great. So let's just review what we did. We basically did a git init. We basically created the React app. Notice this dot here. Cleaned up our README situation, and then we just made the initial commit. Then what we did is we ran the default app by just pointing our browser at localhost 3000. Cool. Now let's Docker up with the app. So we're going to Dockerize everything, including hot reloading. The first thing we're going to do is create a Dockerfile. Then we're going to create a dockerignore file, which I'll explain. Then we're going to get rid of the node modules directory, which is huge. All our dependencies, because we don't need them locally. All we want to do is have our code there, and if we change it, it changes inside Docker. But we don't want to have node modules inside Docker and on our laptop, so we're just going to remove it. Then we're going to do a Docker build in order to create our image. Then we're going to point our browser at local dev 3001. You can just use localhost if you're using Docker desktop. So let's have a look at the Dockerfile. So here's our Dockerfile. We're going to use node 12, which is LTS, with the Alpine minimum image. Use whatever you want, as long as it has the node and yarn installed. Let's set up our work there. Then we're going to copy package JSON, right? This file needs to be copied in, and if we were using npm, then copy the package log file also. And what we're doing, we're saying, okay, Docker, grab this image. This is the work that we're using. Copy the package JSON file in. Run yarn. That is the equivalent of npm install, right? This is like saying yarn install by default. Then copy everything over except what's in the dockerignore file. Then start up yarn, exposing the port 3000. Then we want to grab our dockerignore file. So we want to put dockerignore, because we don't need to have dockerignore put into the Docker. Our Dockerfile does not have to go into Docker. Most importantly, we don't need our node modules directory going in there at all. It'll be created anyway, and later on, as you'll see, we'll fix things so that the node modules directory is populated by yarn with the dependencies inside Docker and not on our local machine, even though we'll be able to hot reload from the files in our local machine. That's really cool. So we've got our Docker file set up, we've got our dockerignore file set up. What we need to do is get rid of our node modules, because node modules is, 236 mega, so we'll just get rid of it. Okay, so we've gotten rid of the node modules on our laptop. So now we can build the Docker image and run it. Here's the command we need for that. Let's have a look at this. What we need to do is do a Docker build with the tag of work : CRA, create React app. That way we can always spin this up whenever we want. And we want to have this carried out in the current directory. Hopefully it'll tell us words to the effect that it's already successfully built and tagged. And then we're going to run it. We're going to say Docker run interactively with the terminal, remove the container when we're done, set up a volume so that the current directory is going to be hooked up with the work directory, so that that's what's going to allow us to make changes which will be immediately reflected in a shared Docker directory. We also want to set up a volume on the Docker, which is node modules, so we won't even see it. In any case, they're dependencies for the operating system on the Docker, not our laptop, so we don't need them for any reason. And we're going to share our port. It'll run on 3000 inside the Docker, but we may be using it, so we'll just use 3001. We can use any port we want to here. And we're running chokidar use polling environment variable as true, and that's what's going to help us get our hot reloading. And the image we want to run is the one we just created, which is work CRA, right? So let's go ahead and do this. So we're going to say docker build, tag that as work CRA in the current directory. Cool. Some people turn off by saying silent, so they don't have to see all the warnings. But I like to see the warnings, so I know what's going on. It does take a little while. And there we are, successfully built, and we got it tagged. Great. Okay, let's run this. Just for the heck of it, we'll use a different port. Let's use 3020. Cool. And all we're doing is we're grabbing the image that we've already made. A container is being spun up, and that's it. And we're going to be up and running in a moment. It's already starting the development server. Right? So if I did either of these, this is the IP of the Docker, and this is the local host. I will use the IP of Docker machine. So I'm going to point my browser at localdev 3020 because we can. And there's our React app running. Now again, local dev here is just something I just put in my etc hosts. Docker machine, what's the IP? And it'll say what the IP is. And I can just use that. We have it running, that's it. Now let's test the hot reloading. How can we do that? Let's just go into source app.js, make a change, and we should see it immediately. We do have the source here from the Docker, right? We're actually going to edit that. So let's say edit the, okay? So we're going to save our file, then immediately go here, and there's our change right there. If we put this in, edit this, it already changed automatically with this. So we have hot reloading. Okay, cool. Okay, so now use the image for whatever you want. Now, if we now do a Docker PS, we can see that our Docker container is running. Okay? Based on the image we made before. Okay, we can run another one if we want, or we can just do a Control-C here. And that just brings it down. Our container's not running anymore. And if we want to, we can just bring it up again. And this time even run it on a different port if we wanted to. But we'll just bring it up again. And it'll actually have the changes because the changes are right here in our laptop. The changes are in effect. Why? Because it's just changing our code. So if we do a cat source, right? It says edit this. And we're all set to go.